So I had a conversation recently with a web team at a college who was stuck in a painfully familiar trap. They had a sprawling, chaotic website that had grown like an untended garden over the years, and they knew they were letting users down. They had plenty of ideas about how to make things better, and yet every time they tried to improve things, they hit a wall. Does that sound familiar? I suspect it might. The team had been doing this for years, and they had developed what I call institutional scar tissue. Every suggestion was met with an internal voice saying, "We tried this once before and it didn't work," or they were thinking, "I just don't have the power to change things." They'd been worn down by years of small defeats until the only option that felt possible was small incremental improvements on what already existed. And incremental improvements, when applied to something that's fundamentally broken, is a bit like repainting a house that has crumbling foundations. Sure, it will look nicer from the street, but you're still one bad storm away from serious structural failure. When you try to fix an existing website, you inherit all the reasons it was broken in the first place. Every stakeholder who fought for their pet page is still there, and every "but we always have this" section comment is still lurking. Every technical limitation that forced an awkward compromise is still constraining your options. Worse, you're starting from a position of defense. You have to justify why something should be removed or changed. The burden of proof is on you to explain why the current state is wrong, rather than on stakeholders to explain why their content deserves to exist. And this is exhausting work, and it rarely produces genuinely transformative results. Now, if you've been following my stuff for a while, you'll be thinking, hang on, Paul, haven't you spent years telling people not to do periodic website redesigns? And you'll be right, I have. I've written at length about how the boom-bust cycle of website redesigns is damaging, how you end up with a shiny new site that slowly decays until someone throws a tantrum and the whole thing has to be rebuilt from scratch. Incremental improvements is almost always the better path. Small incremental changes based on real user data. No big launches, no throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So why am I suggesting we do exactly that? Because sometimes the rot runs too deep. You're dealing with thousands of pages of redundant, out-of-date and trivial content. When every attempt at incremental change gets blocked by institutional politics, when the team has been so beaten down that they can't imagine anything better, well, you need a different approach. Not a traditional redesign where you migrate all the old problems into new templates. You need something more radical. You need to imagine what you would build if you were starting from nothing. The approach I suggested to this team was counterintuitive. Stop trying to fix the website. Instead, imagine building something from scratch. If you were launching your college's online presence tomorrow with no existing site, what would you build? What are the actual tasks people are trying to accomplish? What questions do they have at every stage of their journey? Strip away all the accumulated cruft and look at what prospective students genuinely need. You see, for a college focused on student recruitment, it might be shockingly simple. Someone needs to find a course, understand if they can afford it, and apply. That's perhaps, 200 pages of genuine content, depending on how many courses you offer? Not the thousands that currently exist. Now, don't announce that you're going to redesign the website. That's going to trigger immediate defensiveness. Every stakeholder starts worrying about their territory, and before you finish the sentence, half the room is already composing their objections. Instead, frame the whole exercise as a thought experiment. We're not proposing anything, we're just imagining what perfect would look like. What if we could build with no constraints? What if we were starting fresh tomorrow? The framing is disarming. People stop defending and start dreaming. They can engage with the vision without feeling threatened because it's explicitly hypothetical. No one is being asked to commit to anything. It's like asking somebody what they'd do if they won the lottery. They'll tell you all sorts of things that they would never admit to wanting otherwise. But don't do this thought experiment alone. Bring in a few trusted people from other departments early in the process. Ask them what excites them and what would make it look better for them. Let them shape the vision alongside you. When you do this, something important shifts. It stops being the web team's idea and becomes a collective vision. Those collaborators become invested. They'll defend it in meetings that you're not in. They'll sell it to their own teams. And if one of those collaborators happens to be a senior executive, you've just gained a powerful champion who can clear obstacles. Think of it like rolling a boulder downhill. The hardest part is getting the thing moving. You're pushing and you're straining and it barely budges. But once you've got a few people pushing with you, momentum begins to build. Energy creates energy. Excitement spreads. And what started as a small team's thought experiment becomes something the whole organization wants to see. Now, the output of all of this imagining should be something tangible, not a document. Documents don't generate momentums, but prototypes do. You can write the most beautifully reasoned strategy document in the world and everyone will read it and walk away with slightly different interpretations of what it actually means. But show people a clickable prototype where they can move through the experience from beginning to end and suddenly everyone's on the same page. There's no ambiguity. They can see it, click through it, and imagine themselves using it. I often recommend that you create what I essentially call a shiny thing. And this is a functional prototype of an ideal experience, built quickly and without worrying about practical constraints. It's not meant to be launched, it's meant to excite. The UK Digital Service did exactly this when they were trying to transform government websites. They got a small budget to build a prototype of what better would look like, ignoring all the legacy systems and political considerations. When they published it and got public feedback, everybody loved it. And that enthusiasm created the momentum to push through all of the obstacles that had seemed insurmountable before. Once you've got people excited about your collective vision, something interesting happens. You flip the burden of proof. Anyone who objects is now the one ruining the party. Oh, but our CMS can't support it. Stops being a conversation ender and becomes a question. Why not? Shouldn't our system be flexible enough to deliver what we and users actually want? But we've always had a certain piece of content no longer works as an argument either. If it doesn't serve the vision everyone now wants, it's the thing that needs to be doing the justifying. Why should it get to stay on the website? And remember COVID. Working from home was impossible before 2020. Absolutely out of the question. IT couldn't support it. Security was a nightmare. Productivity would collapse. And then suddenly it wasn't impossible at all because there was enough momentum and desire to make it happen. Organizations can change dramatically when they really want to, and your job is to make them want to. One final piece of advice, keep the project small and separate. When you're trying to create a new vision, scope creep is the enemy. Someone will point out that we also need to consider existing students. Someone else will mention that the CMS is being replaced next year. Another person will want to tie it in with the new CRM system. Before you know it, your focused vision becomes a massive, unwieldy initiative that will take years and satisfy nobody. When people try to expand the scope, don't fight them. Simply agree that their concern is important and deserves its own dedicated project. You're absolutely right. Existing student retention deserves as much attention as recruitment. We'll run it as a separate project and bring the two together later. This way, you actually make progress on one thing instead of being paralyzed by trying to solve everything at once. Remember, perfect is the enemy of good, and comprehensive is the enemy of actually getting shipped. If you're stuck maintaining a website that feels like a lost cause, I'd encourage you to try this approach. Stop asking yourself, how can we fix this? And start asking yourself, what would we build if we were starting from scratch? Map out what users actually need, create a prototype of that ideal experience, get stakeholders excited about the vision, and then, and only then, figure out how to make it real. The constraints that feel immovable today might prove surprisingly flexible once people are genuinely on board with what you're proposing. The trick is to give them something worth wanting. Now, if you're an in-house digital leader trying to drive this kind of change and you're finding those organizational politics overwhelming, I do offer one-to-one coaching to help build influence and lead with more confidence. And sometimes having someone in your corner who has navigated these waters before makes all the difference. So if that's you, by all means, drop me an email to paul@boagworld.com.